Support, and Hardim's going to go into that in excruciating detail, telling you about what things work and what doesn't work and why they work and things like that. And then finally, I'll hopefully go over here in the middle of this, and you can come up to the front so you can see the slides better. Some of them are going to be sort of small, I think. So just to get everyone on the same page, in terms of a definition, when we think of decision support, the decision support system is a huge change in your organization. And there's going to be some people in the organization that are doing this and that everyone's on board and you have support from your leadership. The next thing you have to think about is what are the capabilities of your information technology system? And so in that sense, you have to think, do you have the data that's necessary? Do you have the hardware that's necessary to run this decision support? Do you have good network connectivity? So if you don't have a good, solid computing infrastructure, it's going to be difficult to do your decision support. Excuse me. The next thing you want to talk about is the interventions that you're going to actually make. And so you want to make sure that you match the interventions back to the priorities you're trying to do while you're taking into consideration the capabilities of your system. Because not everyone has a system that's robust enough to do all the different kinds of decision support that you may want to do. They're ready to work. And then we'll figure out how to roll these interventions out into your organization. You're going to have to communicate with some people, train some people about what's going on and things like that. And then finally, you want to sort of do some sort of evaluation of your system to find out if it's working. In my experience, there's always a lot of editing or refixing the system at this point in time when you find out it didn't work exactly as possible. So we usually go back and start again at the beginning and run through this again with this long process, and we're going to go into that, each of the steps in more detail now. So the first thing we talk about is identifying the goals of your program. And usually these goals emerge from some key organizational performance and improvement initiatives. These can come from either an external source like your government, insurance companies, companies that are paying your hospital to do work may have some restricted goals. I know in the United States, in some of the places I've visited here already, I've seen that diabetes is a huge effort and people are really trying to address that. And so you might want to focus on your decision support, meeting the diabetes targets, for example. Those could be some external drivers, interested in disease management, or maybe the head of quality in your organization is trying to figure out how to improve the quality. Sometimes we have people that are trying to improve the effectiveness, maybe reduce the costs of things, improve the throughput of the system. And then lots of times we just have clinicians or patients that have questions, and we're trying to develop some systems to help them answer their questions. So when you think about the targets for clinical decision support, not every problem can be solved by clinical decision support. I mean, we're good at everything like that. I'm not saying we're not good, but we can't solve the traffic problem in Delhi with our decision support. So you got to remember that we have limitations. When you think about these things, you want to think about what are the kinds of problems in your hospital that are amenable to a decision support solution. So the first thing are patient management decisions that occur frequently. And so, for example, like I mentioned, diabetes, we have lots of patients with heart. Your decision support is going to be used as often as possible. The other thing you want to think about is you want to look where there's a big gap in your performance. So if you're already right at the very best of your abilities in treating some diseases, you probably don't need decision support there. Where you want to think about when you're doing decision support is where you're not meeting the goals that you've set for yourself or your organization. So where there's a big gap, there's more room for improvement, it's easier to make an improvement. So you want to think about where are you weakest, and maybe think about working there. You can also think about specific events where you might be able to reduce the costs or improve your quality or safety. So you may know that you have people are ordering too many MRIs in your organization, for example. So you might want to put some decision support in to help people understand when they should be ordering MRIs and when they aren't. That can help for you to reduce your costs. And then sometimes you want to think about when performance can be improved through better distribution of knowledge. So it could be there's places where you have very top-level experts in some specific field of medicine, but the rest of the people in the organization don't have that. And if everyone has to call the one guy or the one woman who knows everything, that's sort of a bottleneck. And so sometimes you can use decision support to spread that knowledge out throughout your organization. And that's another way to think about a good target for decision support. If you put a decision support system into your hospital, is there a question in the back? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
We had a lot of trouble in our organizations trying to figure out how to prioritize this. And being that I'm sort of a quantitative kind of guy, I like to have some way of ranking the suggestions. So we've developed this little formula that we like to think about. We don't do this as an exact science, but these are the things that we think about. So we think about, is this going to have an impact on patients? So like if you don't see any patients with, let's say in Delhi, I wouldn't expect a lot of patients with hypothermia, for example. You shouldn't do a decision support because you're not going to see it. Now, if you're in the northern part of Europe or the northern part of the United States, we have a lot of cold weather, and that can be a real problem. And so you got to think about, do we have patients that are meeting this criteria? You also want to think about an organizational impact. Like if we did this and we fixed this, would this change our organization? If we reduced our costs, would we be in a better position to compete in the environment? If we were faster, would we have more patients come through? Would we make more money? You can think about what's the impact going to be on the clinicians. Now we know that the more impact we make on the clinicians, the more the clinicians don't like us. And so the less impact you can have on those clinicians, an important thing. So all of these things are sort of going in the adding part of this equation. So all these things add up. And then you want to think about, like I mentioned, the gap between your performance from where you want to be and where you are. And then Dr. Sahi talking, you'll realize that some of these things are very, very difficult to do. You shouldn't start with the most difficult things. Start with something you can win easily. And then finally, the cost of addressing this. And so if it's going to cost you way too much, you can't afford it. So those things would be some negatives that would help you decide what to do. The next thing you want to do is you want to identify some of the stakeholders in the system. So you want to think about who are the people that are going to be the key to your success. And so in this case, you want to think about the highest level people in the organization that you know that can stand up and say, this is an important project. Whether that's the CEO or the chief medical officer, head of quality in your organization, you want to think about high-level people that when any of those people talk in your organization, everyone stops and listens and says, that sounds like a good idea, because he's my boss. So you want to get those as high as you can. You want to make sure you have some governance organization and structures in place so people can make a decision. And usually people in our type of position want to have high-level committees that can make a decision, so if something goes wrong, we can blame the committee and not ourselves. And then you're right there on the ground, in the units, they're doing this work, that can say, I've been using this and it's really good, and here's how you do it if you don't understand. So you want to have as much support as you can from the highest levels to the bottom levels of your organization to try to make this successful. The next aspect, yes, go ahead.
I have a question regarding the CDS for the CDS, right? Especially on the patient side. Pre-installation of the CDS, would you want to measure some matrix for the patient side? So what would be some of the matrix, like something that I can think of is probably say a medication error or something? Because you probably want to build a case and say, this is what we were, post-implementation, this is where we are. So could you just...
Absolutely. What do you measure before you start with your CDS and after? So I mentioned that gap idea. And so usually people try to find out where their problems are. So it may be that you have a problem in medication safety. You're making lots of errors in your pharmacy. Lots of patients are getting the wrong medications because the physicians are ordering the wrong doses, for example. So you'd like to try to make some sort of a measure, so you can say, you know, maybe 10 or 15% of our medications come to, the orders come to the pharmacy with the wrong dose. So you'd maybe do a study for a week or two, collect some data to try to get that measure, and then when you put your system in, you try to see and hope that that gap, the 10% got down to maybe 1 or 0.5%. And so then you'd be able to trumpet that as a great success in your organization. So usually we do some sort of, at least a small study to begin with to try to understand if there really is a problem or not. And a lot of times people will come to you and say, we've got their data, and then when you put your system in, you'd like to be able to show some success. That's a really good question. So then the next thing you have to do, so once you've identified this gap, you've figured out what you need to do, is you got to look at your clinical information system and see what capabilities you have. And you got to make sure, I can't emphasize enough, that your infrastructure is fast and reliable. I mean, your electronic responsive, it has to have good response time. You can't have dead spots in your network. I mean, the infrastructure just really has to work. Otherwise, the decision support is just going to be, you can't build something good on top of something bad. That's the idea there. And then you want to think about your data. This is the most difficult part we have in any decision support system, is how do we get the data in a coded form that our knowledge can run on. And that means that someone's got to enter the data. Either we have to get it from the lab, or we have to get our radiologist to code the findings, or we have to get the doctors to put coded data into the system. We can't just have people typing progress notes on our system using the EHR or like a word processor and expect to do good decision support. Somehow we have to get some coded data.
Because what you're talking about, from what I gather just now and then your question is, unfortunately in India, we don't have so much infrastructure. They don't even have an EMR. So this may be, I don't say that what you're saying is wrong. But maybe for the people out here is, we have to just mention that the CDS availability should only be made once your EMR. So that's the next step. We're talking about the future right now.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it is going to be required, it needs to be done. But I think maybe, if you can just mention that the EMR has to be in place and working.
Absolutely.
So don't think of it as a first step towards your hospital.
Exactly.
So, you can talk about the Aiims levels and all that, maybe a little.
Yeah, so what he's saying is you have to have an EHR in place that's working before you can do it. So, like both Dr. Singh and Dr. Sahi are going to talk about using the VA system, which is an open source software system. It's very robust and has a lot of experience using that system. So, I mean, but implementing that system is not easy. I mean, you need a lot of servers, and you need a network connection, you need terminals, and I recognize that infrastructure is always a problem in a place like India, where you're always cost challenged, I guess is what you'd say. And so this is always a next step. So it's where we want to go. You really need this decision support to get the real benefits from an EMR, but it's the second step. That's a very good point. And then the final is intervention. So a lot of people, when I say decision support, think immediately about alerts and reminders. And I'm just going to popping up alerts and reminding people, or you might think of that as nagging. I don't know if any of you are married. Suggesting that you take out the garbage, or you go do something, or fix something in the house. Screen someone, you think about questionnaires or flow sheets. If you're trying to plan or document, you want to think about some templates. If you think about prescribing, you might want to think about some order sets or some alerts and reminders. So the idea is you match sort of the problem of the type of care that you're trying to address with your intervention, and try to map those two together to the right thing. So you shouldn't use alerts to educate patients or to educate physicians. That's not a good thing. Patient references and reference resources are educational material, not alerts, for example. And then you want to think about where in the workflow this is going to go. And I will say this is a simplified diagram, but a few points where you can actually interrupt the physician without really interrupting the physician. So you think about the beginning of the visit, places like that in the workflow. Think about how that can work. Then you have to build these interventions, and you want to involve your stakeholders. You want to think about how the workflow is going to change because of this decision support. So these are all key activities when you're building these systems. And then you need to test and launch these systems. You need to make sure that you haven't violated any rules, that that the systems are working, that they're popping up at the right point in time, that they're calculating the patient's age correctly, things like that, or the patient's weight. Like in the United States, we have tremendous problems between pounds and kilograms. We're constantly converting between those things. If we write a rule in one unit, we have to make sure we transfer our data into that unit. These things are, you think this is simple and that no one would ever make this mistake, but we make this mistake all the time. Then you want to think about how we're going to evaluate this thing and continually enhance our program. So like I mentioned, you may find out that you're putting out some alerts and there are just too many alerts and the physicians are complaining, saying they can't get their work done. You might want to try to figure out how to make that alert more specific, reduce the number of times it's firing, and try to figure out how you're going to refine the system and get it into place. So then you want to, once you're going to do this, you make your final solution. You got to remember that different interventions are effective for different outcomes. You want to match those two together. You want to try to select your best intervention based on the availability of your infrastructure, ease of implementation, user acceptance, and sort of the impact on the organization. And then you want to get a lot of input. You want to communicate this, refine these interventions as much as you can before the rollout process. This is a screen of our new book that will be coming out in the middle of the board, an implementer's guide, and it'll basically lead you through the process that I just talked about. There's chapters on each of these sections, and it was written by about 10 of us together. You can also follow me on Twitter as Dean Sig. I sometimes post stuff about Dr. Singh, or if there's any questions, I may not to answer any more, but we'll also have some time at the end for questions of all of us. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Dr. Singh. Very nice. Thank you.
Abhi Kanta was a president of Aiims and Disability. So we would like to welcome him and
I've been back here for about 20 years. I finished my MBBS in 1993 and I went to US after that. And so it's really, really nice and honor and privilege to be back here. So thank you all for inviting us. I actually, after I was my residency in clinician, so I had to get all those alerts and reminders and all that clinical decision support that Dean just talked about. Safety research for the last about 8 years or so within the VA system and the college medicine system. I've actually worked with Dean Sig for the last about 4 years, and it's been great because I keep telling him all the things that they built, why they don't work, and why he needs to do it. And I also tell them the things that we all as clinicians, because we learn a lot from each other. So the goal today is to sort of focus in on two of these clinical decision support interventions and see, talk about effectiveness. What makes them work, what makes them not work so well. I'm going to talk about alerts and reminders. I'm going to put them in one row because and then I'm going to go over these are the two that I'm going to go a little bit more in detail. So please feel free to stop me and ask questions. This is a practice session. I want to learn from you all as much as I talk to you about. reminder dialogue, and like inbox like email. It's not dependent on an active interaction between the practitioner and the computer. So I'll show you a little bit further. The reminders are sort of just sitting there on the screen. If you can ignore them, and you don't have to interact with them at all. So that's all that is asynchronous information. Okay. So in general use of clinical decision support, and I think Dean laid out a pretty good sort of case for this, that in general we know that at least in that 3 minutes or 5 minute visit that we might have, maybe you'll order an HIV test and get them screened. So you need to catch the attention. So that's how clinical decision support alerts and reminders could potentially have sort of a rationale for use. So let's go rationale here, here, and for your context, one would be patients, one would be screening, already cancer screening, who is screening with diabetes related measures, somebody's cholesterol. There's a whole host of issues that could be used in cardiovascular reduction, for which reminders could be built. What about rationale for alerts? We know that there are medication safety problems. Actually, that's something the audience was. We know that there are medication errors. In US, we have issues with test results and so on and so forth getting lost to follow up. So we have information coded in the electronic format in the EMR. Somebody is trying to prescribe the same drug. Even 15 years later, you would get a pop-up. We could improve the test result communication to providers. So let's say the clinicians practicing within 5 different hospitals. In the ideal world, if one of their patients has a normal test, which we need to sort of bring to their attention, we could send them a note to whoever we have to use. A couple slides on how to see this too well. This is sort of the CPRS screen. When you open the CPRS screen, which is sort of just this is the coverage sheet, this is the test patient that needs to be satisfied for that patient when they come to the visit. So I'm about to see a patient in the VA, I have about 15-20 minutes that the VA gives me to see a patient. When the patient comes in, there are certain sets of reminders that I need to do for that patient. So the patient already had a colonoscopy last year. The colon cancer screening reminder would not pop up. So it is mandated. Some of them are dependent on the facility. So there's about 160 VA facilities. Some VA facility might think we need a reminder for something because we're in this kind of region. But there's some reminders that are nationally mandated. That's how they show up. So the reminders show up, and you could just ignore the reminders and go on and do your daily work. You can see one of them is a tobacco use cessation reminder. Another one you can remind everybody is a diabetic foot exam. All right, so let's go over some examples of reminders, and I'm going to walk you through what I think are good reminders and some that are really, really bad. Let's talk about some good examples. So I think of the 51-year-old, Dr. Siddiq, who, has colon cancer. We're going to get a colonoscopy. Patient, uncontrolled diabetes, hasn't had an eye exam. That'll be a nice reminder for the patient. That the doctor, an eye exam for the last 2 years. There could be a patient on the inpatient floor, which is higher profile access. Let's talk about some bad examples. An 85-year-old patient does not need a colon cancer exam or a screening. And so that would be an example of a bad reminder. If a colonoscopy reminder shows up in that patient, that is a bad example. That's what the clinician is really bad. And there's always examples of rape that doesn't even happen.
For Indian example, the most commonly used
any creatinine in the EMR. The EMR will tell you there is no creatinine to get the kidney function. But all this drug has to go to the kidney. If you don't get the kidney function bad, it's bad for you. It can kill you. So if you get a little top saying no creatinine, so a computer can tell you that. So it's a good reminder. So if somebody is taking aspirin 81 milligram for heart, and now you're giving them some Crocin or paracetamol, but the computer will tell you, hey, this is a big drug. Well, it's not really a big drug. You know, we all know that. Once it alert notification needs to be talking to the EMR you're using, or the radiologist might really be talking about the class or the pneumonia or a normal, like a cancer-looking shadow on their chest. We want so many things. I mean, you're seeing about 1,500 patients, we probably already have some of these about 20 of them, and that's every day. So when these things come back to you, somebody needs to get your attention to that normal. So that would be the way to do it. One of the ways to do it. So that's an example of the word communication. So lots of important notifications. For example, nothing but do something about it. For that extent, somebody's supervisor is 2 points away from the supervisor. So it's not know that. I don't want to know. And so that's an example of bad alert notification. And that's what leads to things like alert fatigue. And this is a real term. Some of you, how many of you are familiar about what this word alert fatigue or reminder fatigue? Because of informatics, journeys, HR journeys, this will come up. I think now people are really fatigued. They're tired of looking at these alerts and reminders. Quality and cost. And I think what we need to do is to use a social technical approach, and I'll talk a lot about that to improve their effectiveness. And that includes just not the technology part, but thinking about the social system in which the technology is embedded. Thank you so much.
So what is evidence-based medicine electronic decision support? It is a plug-and-play decision support system that can be integrated with any electronic medical record system or any personal health record system. And it's very important, as Dean pointed out, the knowledge can be for the patient, it can be for the clinician. And clinician in the US is the physician, the nurse, the physician extenders like the PAs and nurse practitioners. So that information should be available to any of those. And this is also a collaborative tool for authoring and commenting on decision support contents. And you will see an example of that. So what is the information that's there? It could be patient data, it could be knowledge, it could be other administrative information, demographics. But what EBMEDS does is it gives links or hyperlinks to clinical guidelines where I can continue to hone in my skills or my competency in the specialty by reviewing certain articles. And also it helps update certain calculators, forms, and algorithms. As Dean pointed out, the task of filling in certain forms is quite tedious. So if you can fill the information directly from electronic medical record into those forms, whether those are third-party TPA forms or they are any back-to-work forms or disability forms, that should be made easier to that. A bit of architecture on the solution that I'm talking about, evidence-based. It's a very nice way to get the information. All we need is if you have structured data within your EHR, and most EHRs have structured data, if you're able to export XML format for the data, then that will be accepted. And if you're willing to, of course, monitor the performance, then that is also supported. So if you have at the workstation where you have the electronic medical record system, the database could be any, whether it's GTM for Vista or Cache or Oracle or MySQL, whatever. Anonymous patient data would go into this EBMEDS local service. This is a request message going in an XML format, going across this client component in web server application, with a blue component that searches into that evidence-based local service and able to show, as you can see here, look at the core engine, look at the best practices, contraindication, interactions, the scripts that I will talk about, whether those are global script, national script, or local scripts, and then be able to push out a response in a fraction of a second back to the electronic medical record in whatever way you want, whether it's a pop-up window or a tab, and that would be made available. This data and the evidence-based guideline resides on a server. This is from Finland, so this has to be there because they need to constantly update this evidence so that it's almost very current. And they have a team of 15 physicians, including one of my colleagues and Dr. Radeep's colleague, Dr. David Atkins. He is a reviewer of this evidence. And what they do is they grade the evidence. As many of you may be aware, evidence can be grade A, B, C, D, and that. A being unequivocal evidence that the controlled trials that have happened, no physician or nurse or anybody would have qualms with that evidence. So that's grade A evidence. And a good example is metformin is the drug of choice for type 2 diabetes. There is ample evidence, 29 studies have happened, and there is proof that that is the treatment of choice. So this would be where all this would lie, and the hyperlink would be updated as the evidence is updated. So what is needed for building a generic clinical decision support service such as EP-Meds? Best available evidence has to be there. Of course, there should be any compromise on the quality of the evidence. A lot of publications happen across the world which are published in peer-reviewed journals, whether it's New England Journal, BMJ, or many others out there. So it should be shared ideas. Again, this is a collaborative effort. You have access to be able to collaborate with the experts that are there who kind of vet the scripts or guide you on to how you best code those knowledge and on the standards that are well acceptable. So you should be able to use the rules developed by others as a template. So I may have a template that metformin is the drug of choice. So I can use that template and make it customized to the local workflow. And I'll show you how easy it is to do that. Translating it into different languages, of course this is already now, the guidelines are available in 6 or 7 languages. Hopefully with time we'll have some in the Indian reader languages. At the Health 2.0, many of you were there, we saw an example of how YouTube and some solutions are being used to translate the language as a voluntary effort. So the video is presented and it's audio dubbed by some, and there are many Indian languages that are already on that particular solution that we saw. Mapping between patient recording, patient record coding systems, LINES, NOMAD, CD, ICD, 9, 10, or whatever coding you have, we need to have that, and then the application has to be functioning at the point of care. So there are endorses Cochrane library. There's particular guidelines that are linked to the EP-Meds as a strength in the way of the number of summaries that are there, as well as the Cochrane reviews, almost 2,400 summaries are there. And you'll see an example. So before I go to that, let me go ahead and show you that evidence. And this is so this would be, of course, the hyperlink which will point to the wealth of evidence. As you can see, there are close to 4,000 evidence summaries, the guidelines, and the advantage of online guideline is that it can be updated and it's available in real time. So if I'm a cardiologist and I want to look at any particular guideline in real time, I'm able to look at that, and that article and all will be available to me right there. And each of that, these articles are graded and the evidence will be there. So if I want to look at, for example, metformin and diabetes, it will take me to that particular review. And as you can see, this is metformin monotherapy. Now this particular is the evidence I was talking about, grade A evidence. All this, you can see almost 29 studies were conducted, reviewed by these experts, and then they graded this, so that physicians who are, and nurses for that matter also, would be able to have no issues with having a patient with diabetes not with metformin unless there is a contraindication, and we'll talk about that. So what are the needs of coding data? Of course, all of these need to be coded. The problems, the medication, test results, measurements, risk factors, procedures, and treatment plan, as Dr. Gogia was pointing out, it's very important that the data has to be accurately put in. If it's garbage in, it will get garbage out. So we need to make sure we have accurate data that goes in and it's coded appropriately. One of the secondary benefits is, why we're doing this. Of course, we need to, the reason we are doing this is because we know there are a lot of medical errors. The Aiims report of 1999 suggested that almost 98,000 patients die every year because of medical errors. And then there's another report came out in 2001, the quality chasm report, where they identified that almost 50% of the patients in the US are getting the care that the evidence suggests. A patient with coronary artery disease should be on a beta blocker unless there is a contraindication of diabetes or bronchial asthma, and only 50% of patients with coronary artery disease are getting a beta blocker. So there we have to bridge that gap. And I think one way to do is to do a proactive virtual health check on the patient or the population of patients that we are managing. And this is a way that you can do that. And it can serve two purposes. One would be find people who need intervention and contact them. So I can run a report on any hospital which is using this and has data in XML format or a PCR format. And say, okay, the 100 patients who are coming in Monday through Friday or on a Monday who are diabetic, how many of them have not had hemoglobin A1C in the last 6 months, who have not had an eye exam? So proactively we can look at that. Also we can do analytics. This is for management as well as for Office of Quality and Clinical Excellence. They want to look at statistics. This data is very useful. For me, as the Chief of Medicine, I had almost 15 primary care providers. I would use this data for peer pressure. Let me tell you how. For each of our physicians, we had a panel of 1,500 patients. So on our staff meeting, we would share how one physician is doing compared to the peers. They would not know who the peers are. That would be anonymized. So if I'm doing 60% compliance on my chronic disease management and Dr. Hardeep is doing 90%, I know always he excels. So I go up to him and say, Hardeep, what is it that you're doing different? He says, I engage the nurse in managing the patients. And truly, it is a team effort. It's a team sport. To co-manage the patient, particularly chronic disease, the nurse can do a lot more. And I know that's a challenge in India, but at the number of hospitals that I have consulting opportunities that I have, I see that we are moving in the direction where after the nurse is educated and trained and the physician gets comfortable, the nurse can handle many of these clinical alerts and reminders before the patient comes to see the physician. So I think the collaborative effort between the nurse, the doctor, the dietitian in case of diabetes, or the certified nurse educator, which also is coming up, is very important. So this is also a tool for quality measurement. I was meeting with the hospital team yesterday and we talked about, what kind of people we can identify and measure. So we need to identify which people are eligible for a particular intervention and exclude them. For example, coronary artery disease with this beta blocker. The people who are eligible are with the ICD diagnosis of coronary artery disease. And the measure we're looking at is how many of them are on a beta blocker. So we need to define the beta blocker as a group, and any of the beta blocker medications listed that if they're prescribed, then that reminder should not show up. However, the contraindication, the patient is diabetic or patient is bronchial asthma, we need to exclude them. But then we need to define how many people receive the intervention, that is those who receive beta blocker in this case, and how many people who have not received the intervention, that would be the target population. We can call them and bring them in and say, when you come in next time or you come into the pharmacy, we'll have a prescription for you and educate them on the use of that particular medication. But there are certain limitations as with anything. Of course, you may have a diagnosis that's not documented, as we found out in the study that Hardeep and Dean are going to present, that there are many cases. And the Joint Commission International or the Joint Commission in the US or anything require that by the third visit, the problem list should be populated. So if a patient had a condectomy and I don't list it and the patient comes in with right lower quadrant pain, I'm going to be spending time and thinking about appendicitis when the problem list should have shown me that the patient already had his appendix removed. So that is very important, and virtual health checks can only do whatever information is within the particular system. So this is an example from a clinic that had 16,000 patients, and we looked at just a very simple cardio-selected beta blocker in patients with COPD, emphysema, or asthma. Of course, we know if it's non-cardio-selected, the asthma can get worse. Very simple intervention that many of us sometimes forget to see. So in this particular case, there were 36 patients who were out there. 32 patients, the physician didn't get the reminder because we don't want reminder fatigue. They're using the right medicine for the right patient and for the right diagnosis. But as a physician, if I have these 4 patients and they are not really having selected beta blocker, I need to know about it so that I can intervene and take corrective action. Another particular, the same study was done by doing almost 100 rules that we looked at and a virtual health check on these patients. As you can see, there was quite a bit of a concern. Many of these patients who should have been on those interventions did not get the intervention. Particularly ACE or R was not used in heart failure in almost 143 patients. Unless, if there's a contraindication, I better document that. If I don't document, the office will call it. As well as, it's not good clinical practice for me not to use what the evidence is suggesting. So again, we heard quite a bit about, how to make reminders tolerable. We have to make it very specific at the cost of losing sensitivity, but that's very important. So we have to increase the threshold. We want to go for the low-hanging fruit. We want to identify links, and this would be available also under the open source with time. And we look at automated decision support as the second generation of the clinical reminders in the VISTA system. This is based on the open source EON technology and protege. For patients with primary hypertension who meet the eligibility criteria, that is what we use. And the purpose is to improve hypertension control. And why is it that we use hypertension? One is hypertension is highly prevalent in the adult practice, so there is a high volume. There is an excellent evidence, so there is a blood pressure control guidelines are there, but also evidence that there is a gap between what the recommendations are and what patients are getting for hypertension. So we have to bridge the gap. That's why we work on hypertension. We are working on diabetes and chronic pain management, some others as part of the Athena next steps that are going forward. So this is what the clinician sees. You saw a little bit of the VISTA screen, but with Athena, it gets even better. You can see here the blood pressure is readed, and this recommendation comes up as a pop-up window. So you say add ACE inhibitor because the blood pressure is elevated from the baseline, and it's already searching what the medication patient is already on, what the problems are, and it comes up as a non-intrusive pop-up window within the electronic medical record system. And this is visualization, again, one of the things that we identified, very important for physicians to have visualization of data, so that on a longitudinal timeline, we can see, when the patient is on 2 medications or 3 medications, and what the blood pressure, systolic and diastolic pressure is there. But in addition, you can also map certain laboratory data with the charting that's available in many EHRs, and particularly in VISTA. I won't go into this. This is the architecture of the EON components within VISTA. I'm sure there's some VISTA fans here. We can talk about it offline, and we can see that. So just a few words about the importance of guideline adherence. Again, this is from Dr. Patman and others. We need the 4 A's: awareness, acceptance, adoption, and adherence. And each of these 4 A's have a certain facilitator. So when you try and make initially, as you do EHR implementation, you want to make physicians aware by priming them in the activities such as profiling of baseline performance. And the question was asked initially, what's your baseline data, and going forward, what is it that we need to do? We need to do active education, the clinical transformation and change management, and I know Dr. Farah Khan and others who are champions in this, they've done this. So you do the academic detailing. We also talk to the senior leadership, the C-level leadership. Why is it that we're doing it? Return on investment cannot just be on the financial, the outcomes, how many lives we save. A good reward would be that this week at this particular hospital, we avoided 9 hospitalizations, we prevented 2 deaths, and we had 200 patients that benefited from the outcomes. There's no dollar amount or no rupee value to that benefit that's out there. Adoption is another one, enabling strategies such as incorporating in the clinical workflow. Again, like I suggested, if you can have a key member, the nurse, the dietitian, everybody working collaboratively on that would be good. And then finally, adherence, reinforcing strategies such as reminders that there. So many physicians like myself, initially we'd struggle, we'll go to the library, look up the evidence, or the librarian would be making rounds with us and be able to do that. So we just go ahead and say, if you build it, field of dreams approach, they will come. So, one last slide here. This is a medical malpractice. Question often would be asked, does clinical decision support lead to more malpractice or less? I leave it up to you, but if I'm in a court of law and I have a patient that I did not use the right medicine, for example, didn't use metformin in a type 2 diabetic, the judge as well as the expert witness are going to ask me, did you not read this evidence? This is a grade A evidence. So I'm better protected if I practice evidence-based. So I'll leave you with that, and I just wanted to give you a brief demo because that is where I wanted to show how this thing would look like in a point of care. Okay, just 1 minute. Okay, this is one particular example. As you can see, this is the generate email EMR. But if I'm looking at a particular patient and move my mouse over, this is already EBMeds and integrated. Very simple reminders and clinical guideline links and alerts come out. Patient has acute myocardial infarction because it's pulling the ICD-9 code or 10 code. It's not using a ACE inhibitor. Mark here, it's saying consider adding. It's not saying you have to add. Ultimate decision resides with the physician or the nurse here. So, okay, patient has MI, is not using a beta blocker, consider adding a beta. As I add a new diagnosis, and I don't have the time to show, I can show you later, it will start flashing. So you can make the interface any different ways you want to do it. And this is one particular example. Another one is from a diabetes management solution that is in use many countries across the world. But I just wanted to show you in this particular example how that interface with EBMeds. And you all can create that interface with whatever EHR you're using, and I'll talk more about it. I'll send you the information on how you do the. So if I have a patient, Tina Emerson, who has, so this is the diabetic patient. So as I pull up the record, it's already within seconds is pulling up the information from the patient's demographic, patient lab, patient problem list, patient's allergy, and it comes up with a recommendation at the point of care. Non-intrusive, but readily available, and as soon as they connect, you will see that. So just 5 more minutes and I'll be done. This is the decision support. You see the little triangle here? This is how if I click on it, it will stay there, okay? So in this particular case, it's showing alcohol and digoxin interaction. Please,
we have to have some time to question.
Yeah, definitely. I'm done with this, and okay. So this is that particular interface I was talking about. You're able to, and just one calculator. We're talking about the cornea. So one thing, patient engagement is very important. So I'll show you. This is from a Framingham heart study. Patient is sitting next to me, and I know that you saw the risk factor was 70% for risk of coronary artery disease. In real time with decision support, I tell the patient if you lower your cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, to 2.0, and you lower your blood pressure to 120/80, for example, and this is patient engagement, the most underutilized resource in healthcare is the patient. If you tell the patient that certain interventions are going to change the morbidity and mortality, you see it went down to 9% by just those two interventions. So this is very compelling evidence, and I think it's educational for me and for the patient who's sitting next to me, and I have more time to discuss the patient's risk and benefits of mortality. So I'll stop here, and thank you for all, and we'll...
I think we should have a question answer session before we go into the next.
We have to respect whatever regulations are there. In US, we are very strict, the HIPAA requirements. In the VA, we have everything is encrypted. I cannot even put a thumb drive.
No, but like you are getting the risk ratio from another side.
No, but there is no data going there. It's yeah, solely the height, weight, no patient name, nothing.
Enter the data.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I didn't realize it was that. Yeah.
Okay, I have some questions.
Yes. Is it just related to the US and other populations?
What study is it?
With all the evidence that you are citing, when will they be implemented to the Indian population?
But on the clinical informatics research that Dr. Hatip talked about, and a lot of that research is now starting in India, with the work happening with the Indian Association of Medical Informatics.
So my question is that if I was to say adopt a Indian physician support system like this into an EMR which is being deployed in India, how relevant it would be?
ICMR diagnosis.
Can you take the mic?
Yes. Indian Council of Medical Research, Proctor Library, if you check with them, it's the gold standard worldwide. Every country, no problem. But there are other guidelines, nice guidelines from UK. You've got BADOD guidelines, which are also open source. They're available for anybody. But they are quite appropriate as you can look through the. I can show you anything that hypertension, cardiac disease. The tropical diseases are unique to, of course, the countries, and that also addresses that.
But I think you have a good point, and I think you might be talking about two different things. One is sort of disease-specific things that Dr. Sanjay talked about, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease. But what about the rest of the clinical decision support interventions? What about the rest of the EMR? Just because the clinical decision support and interventions in EMR works in one setting in the US, that doesn't mean it's going to work in the same, similar setting in India. And that is why we advocate for what we call sort of the socio-technical approach, or also broaden it, socio-political approach to implementing and improving healthcare through health IT. So I think just because one VA system, the EMR works like this and has beautiful interventions, that doesn't mean in the next VA hospital it will do the exact same thing. So you really have to have a lot of local context. I think your point is really well taken.
Yeah, the second question is not to the speakers, but to the audience here, in case any of you are aware. Is there any study done in India on the adverse drug events that is taking place in any of the hospitals or any setting in India?
Adverse drug
Adverse drug events.
Yes, we have. There are pharmacovigilance activities like that, but are still at the nascent stage.
Okay.
The CBHI, actually, the Central Bureau of Health Intelligence, they have started this adverse drug events reporting under the pharmacovigilance activity, but are still at the nascent stage. What they have made is they have made certain forms so that from the hospitals they will report to the CBHI regarding the adverse drug events faced by each and every hospital encounters. But they are still at the nascent stage.
Is this mandated for the government hospitals or?
It is not mandatory. It is still at the nascent stage. But one thing regarding the CDSS, regarding the Indian scenario. Only one experience we have regarding the CDSS of Indian scenario is IMNCA, Integrated Management of Neonatal and Childhood Illness, which is adopted from the WHO model of IMCA. Okay. None of the CDSS has been created in the Indian scenario except IMNCA. Okay. That IMNCA is a pen and paper based CDSS, Clinical Decision Support System, where even a health worker, not a doctor, to the community who can utilize and diagnose, not diagnose, classify the neonatal and childhood illness and make an immediate referral to the local health system. The CDSS which you have explained is well, it suits well in an organized and a regulated setup, but currently with an Indian scenario which is unorganized, which is unregulated, which is poorly integrated, it is difficult to adapt. First of all, as the steps explained by the Dean, the most important thing is we should have a good clinical information system, which we don't have. Number two, that we have a good data structure, which we don't have. Number three, which we should have a local evidence-based system, which we don't have. The ICMR guidelines, which you have explained, is very limited diseases only. They have created guidelines for diabetes, they have created for hypertension, but still for many tropical diseases, it is not. The problem is that the reporting from the local hospitals and acceptance in creating guidelines are very poor. Say for example that we created a guideline like acceptance of mobile telephone.
First CDS system gets applied in a OPD and IPD setting. Then can the same solution that you working on with the CDS solution apply in the IPD and the OPD, or is there a difference, and what has been the experience when the CDS is used in an OPD setting in their direct interaction with the patient?
Yeah, I think the issues are a lot different. I think Dr. Bedi will agree. I mean, in the VA setting, for instance, there's a lot of focus on preventive maintenance and immunization in the outpatient setting. But on the inpatient setting, the focus is more on trying to get DVD prevention, or maybe reminding somebody that there is a catheter inboard that we need to take out. So the interventions are completely different, but the logic and the program, I think, could potentially be exported to both the scenarios.
I'm not a doctor, I'm an engineer by education, and actually
Leadership initiative is very, very, very strong in the VA for use of IT and EMR.
And US, and one of the things that Randeep had mentioned, Nursing informatics actually in the US is far more advanced than medical informatics, and they are a keeper. So
Actively, it allows better care at the point of care because people can make informed decisions. New business opportunities lead to new innovation as well. So in summary, the world is becoming one single virtual community. The efficiency of electronic communication makes it inevitable that we will have interoperability and collaboration. India has one big advantage. It is still new in this space. It can learn from everyone else's mistakes and success. India has a huge resource in information technology. Economies of scale means if you get the right solution in India, it can really become an overnight success. That's all I have to say. Any questions? No questions.
Interoperability around the structured data. You also said 90% of the data is from primary care. It is not a structured data. Do you have any advice for India for reaching from unstructured data to the structured data format? Before we formally take up the EMR principle all around?
First of all, when we talk about EMR and what you're talking about basically is there any data at the primary level? Are they recording anything? So if they're recording something,
Medical record. Medical record is
what he was saying was 90% people are not using any form of data. At least I mean there's not computerized data.
It's a prescription. There's a prescription with the medical.
Makes our lives more efficient. Now, if you can deliver IT or healthcare IT to make a care provider's life more efficient and convenient, then you will use it. Especially if you can use it on a device that he already has. So the incentive is not for government to try and push this on all people. The solution is to find something people want to use to make their own lives easier. And the moment you do that, and the moment everybody is connected, then suddenly you have a network that's open for all kinds of innovation and all kinds of e-services. And then the thing takes a life on its own. And then it's a commercial or a supply and demand thing. Then it's no longer something somebody external is trying to solve. See, that's what I meant by you have ICT convergence, right? People collaborate anyway. How many people are on Facebook? Some 800 million. Is anybody paying them to do this? No. They're putting this information on there because they want to. It's the new way that people interact electronically. Now that same technology is not yet in the business world. In some cases it is, like Salesforce, you have some few applications that truly run in that model. But it doesn't mean that that same technology cannot be applied in the business world. And then you will find that people want to use this technology, and then they will want to code, because then they can access all kinds of services and do new kinds of business and provide new kinds of services before they couldn't. So if you make it a commercial, interest to people, or a question of convenience or efficiency, then they will use it. And my belief is that is what is needed in India. Not only in India, but across the world, in healthcare specifically. If you look at these EHR initiatives all over the world, people are literally spending billions on this. But the question you have to ask is how many doctors sits in front of a patient in the US or in the Netherlands or in Sweden and actually uses a national EHR to look at a patient's history before he diagnoses and treats the patient. And I would say that is negligible. Regardless of how much that system costs to implement, it's negligible. Because the real question or the real problem you have to solve is how do you put that information in front of the care provider while he's sitting in front of the patient in a way that is not intrusive and that he can record what he's doing in a language or in a way that is natural to him. If you can solve that problem, then you solve the whole problem. And that is why I say you have ICT convergence. It's a question of how does communication and ICT come. It's becoming one. And India has the resources to solve this problem.
I have a comment and a question. I've followed the RIOs, the Regional Health Information Organization, and participated in some of them. One of the best ones, there is the RIO, Massachusetts, headed by Dr. Miki Tripathi. And of course, US has been challenged and, we've not reached the level of health information exchange that we would like. At the federal sector, we participated at the VA with the Department of Defense, created a VA-DoD interoperability, and then we also had an open source solution come up called Connect-a-Thon, which was a health information exchange solution. But even in spite of all those efforts, the country is not connected, let alone at the regional level, national level, it's almost unheard of. So my question to you is, in India, of course, we have the states' health departments, which are running, getting funded from central government. A health information exchange solution for each of the states would be something that the governments would be quite interested in. If there is a platform that they can put the data, as they put in structured data to EMRs, that can all be on one platform. Continuity of care record has now been accepted as a good way to communicate. Are you or your solution looked at CCR format to?
Yes, CCR is just like it. I don't have an opinion about any specific standard. To me, it's a question of, this is not something that will be solved by government. I think this is something that will be solved by private business. And it will be a commercial incentive.
Yeah, like Microsoft Health One came out and Google Health, but they were not on the same platform, same standard. But CCR has now become the de facto standard of communicating.
Yeah, I can tell you this now because I've worked and spoken to and studied examples from across the world, and there's no single standard that's applicable or that's accepted in one place. Every region seems to have their own standards and their own ideas of how this is going to work. Tomorrow I have another presentation for some 20 minutes where I will show you an example of how we, at least because we're sponsoring this after all, how we think this might happen.
Okay, I'll answer to some extent your queries about what is happening in India, because there is also a talk immediately after the inauguration by Dr. S.B Bedi, who is the brainchild of the entire interoperability standards. He was part of the Department of IT before he retired. Now he's in CDAC, and he had in 2003, which was one of the first efforts by any developing country, at least in trying to get standards across the world, as far as I know. But unfortunately, he'll be relating the experiences that they went through, and after that, at that time it was under the Ministry of IT. In 2005, the same effort was started under the Department of Ministry of Health, of which I was also involved. And we also brought up some guidelines and all that, which was again, so the same guidelines were created, 3 were evangelized a little more and carried on further. And we are trying to incorporate a lot. Unfortunately, they have not got a stamp. That is the only problem, but these standards are all there. A lot of people have downloaded the standards from there, they have used it in their radio, at least the Indian vendors. But yes, there's no stamp to it. That is the only problem.
I'd just like to make a comment here again. You have loads and loads of standards.
USCHR solution, but there is nothing like a health information exchange. The only place where they're using standards are for insurance companies. They have demand and demand insurance, and it's mandated that they all use a standard dictionary developed by Green Brain. It's a Swedish company that offers them all the claims have to go electronically through Green Brain, and then they approve it. So they're moving.
you have an initiative called HEART or Health Authority of Canada that they published a couple of years ago. That's really, it looks a little bit like HL7 version 3. And they force every provider in Abu Dhabi to upload all their claims, code all their claims and upload it to their own server. But it's nothing that helps care delivery. It's purely a question of reporting at this point so that Abu Dhabi government can know what's going on in their country.
So actually, they've implemented some performance measures for the VA.
I'm just giving what I've heard from whenever I've traveled across the world. Norway and the Scandinavian countries have got an excellent thing to some extent even in England, but in England it's the NHS project has been a big disaster. But Hong Kong I've seen, and CP Wong, we had invited him to come here. He's the main person who is behind it. And the entire Hong Kong, all the citizens have got an IDHR and anybody can walk in. And it's brilliant. Even Taiwan, to some extent, Jack Lee is here. He'll be talking to you about. I hope about his thing, although I don't know what he's talking about. But we do have some examples in the Southeast Asia as well as in Europe. India, of course, we have to learn something. And today's talk by Anne Seller, which is an online presentation, will be giving some models which are suggested for India. Overall, she had taken the 2005 IMI conference itself. She had delegated the Cuba model of healthcare. That was a brilliant management of the entire healthcare system. Now the IT had got very little to do with it. But that is something that we should do. In fact, Cuba has been a healthcare provision model at least for the world. That is
very good, very good. Any other questions? Anyone?
Smaller countries, smaller populations, they have got.
Easy to do, yeah. Especially if you're a dictator and you can just decide to do it.
Okay, we have to thank ICT, and not only are they also a sponsor for this conference and they are giving us valuable information. Thank you, Johan, and thank you, Bhatia. Now again, just the routine of announcements which are mandatory because we do have got some. Again, now there are going to be two workshops. One hosted by Dr.Sanjay Bedi, the president of IIMI, which is in the CMET hall across this thing, which is a workshop for. You can explain more about it. Agarwal is coming now for the Vista. Who are the people? So we'll have a short break now till we go to the thing. There is another workshop which will be talk about the Vista program.
We brought some folders, obviously not enough for everyone here, so it's pretty much first come, first serve.
I'll take one you know that there are two places where Vista is being implemented in Delhi. One is at Max Hospital of Dr. Sahi is here and he has a huge amount of experience. We'll be having some talks on that on Sunday. But not by Dr. Sahi, but and the other is at Aiims Trauma Center. And I believe Dr. Deepak Agarwal will soon be coming here and he will be giving a little information on how they are implementing it. They've got a brilliant program working at Trauma Center and everybody works there on the computer screen, not on the paper. That's something worth seeing. And to some of them who are really initiated, he is quite willing to take you across the Trauma Center to show it actually working there. Okay, we'll have a short break now.
On the thing called private.
600 colleges together. Yeah. Third in labs, anatomy labs, as well as virtual home pages. Yes, okay.
Okay. we'll just giving you an idea here. It asks you that you create page 1. On page 2, it will ask you
Okay.
the
I
template.
will take a photocopy and
The templates are
okay. Okay.
web page.
I will.
Then it will ask you, can you make a template
Who is it?
storage?
Who is in charge
It will
of
give you
the
100 MB of space,
Yeah, right.
and you
Yes,
can
yes.
upload your study materials, your PowerPoint presentation,
Thank you.
your study materials.
Our students will be grateful.
And on the 3rd page, you make an assessment module. I'll just describe how to make an assessment module. In your Gmail account, on the top,
being used on several patients on different days. We keep a record of how much the equipment is being utilized as well, which means that if a hospital is using a particular equipment more than often, then they know that they need more of this. If they know that this particular equipment is not being used at all, then of course they can decide based on that. It also helps in utilization efficiency for the machine. The staff information and rosters. And we provide a dashboard for the faculty and the doctors, an SMS, email, various kinds of reports, complaint handling and monitoring, becoming one of the key things, inventory and stores, and integration with best of course, otherwise this whole system will not run. At the hospital, the same information within a delay of, I believe, right now it's been kept at 5 minutes. Within a delay of 5 minutes is available at the call center. This is the screen that the agent sees. The DC number of patient, the mobile number, as you will see, as I tell you more, is more critical information in this. The address, the city, whatever getting captured is available with us at the call center. The appointment was one of the things on which we received various awards as well, was done by us. In the Indian Trauma Center also, about before we implemented the system, the queues of patients were huge. People used to line up for since 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning just to see the doctor. What we did when we came in is we put in an appointment system, which means that we have told all the patients that their appointments will be made over telephones through a call center. So they call us the number 40401010 is our call center number, and they say that they need an appointment with a particular doctor. We check out the roster for the doctor and we give him an appointment. Once the appointment is made, we then give him a token number through SMS, which is where the mobile number of the patient comes in. So we are giving a token number through SMS, which is captured on his mobile. And let's say if he has a appointment on the 15th of February. So on one day before the appointment, his file is taken out and given to a specific doctor. So once the patient goes there, the patient with the SMS, the patient even gets a time and the room number where the appointment is. So he does not have to wait at all. So today, if you go to Trauma Center, you will see absolutely no queues, none, which has been a huge success at the Trauma Center just because of this great patient review. Here we capture, of course, the patient name, the contact numbers, the departments, and even the diagnosis is there the patient. The staff information is captured by us. As you can see, probably there are about 585 staff at the Trauma Center which we have captured. So each one is categorized and departmentalized so that we can access them. And this is accessible to people at the hospital as well, so they know who are the other staff in the room. The complaint registration and monitoring system is also maintained, where we get the complaint from the various departments of various equipment which is going wrong. And we generate a complaint code, and we give the complaint code to a particular staff to spot us. And of course, we then in turn follow up with the vendor who has provided that particular equipment for the issue. This is the SMS that's being given to patients, faculty, staff. There are various triggers which generates this particular SMS. One, as I said, is appointments. Second is if a doctor is not available on a particular day and he has say 70, 80, hundreds of appointments, then that particular SMS is sent out to all the patients. On today's date, we are not only sending out SMS, we are even calling the patients to inform them that the doctor is not available. So in case senior resident is available, we tell them that you can go show a senior resident, or it can be rescheduled. All that is being done. If the roster is changed, then the information is being given to one step senior person. Once the appointment is done, as I mentioned, this is the kind of report that is being sent to the doctor before the patient is getting to him, which includes the DC number, the discharge date, the resident doctor at the time of discharge, the diagnosis, the procedure that was conducted at the time of discharge, during his stay at trauma center, the existing appointments, and who was the executive who took the appointment for him. This information available at the doctor. This is a dashboard that has been built for the faculty, wherein we have the detailed department summary and the number of patients that that particular doctor has in various wards. It's available in one screenshot, along with the appointments on that particular day. All of that is given to the doctor on one sheet for the appointments. Total number is displayed at the top of the room, and it's also displayed at the reception area. So the patients does not have to go queue up for any apparent reason. And once the number is called up, he goes and this stuff. The PCs are available at doctor's premises where you can see all these reports and everything else. These are general OPD registration and the reception counter at the trauma center. The token is generated if the people are walking in. Even then we refer them as their old case, new case, dressing, or their specific old case, and token is generated at the hospital also. So you can either call up the call center and get an appointment, or once he walks in, he gets an appointment provided that the doctor is available on that particular day and that particular night. These are some of the server rooms and computer facilities where some of the servers are residing. The whole thing, the call center as well as the HIS available is a part of it. I just say part of it is available on the website. In the sense that we have integrated it real time with the website. It gives the number of patients that have been seen in the hospital and number of patients seen today. This is a real time information available right now at the website.
Into a fully open field that one can add on to it, edit onto it. I'm trying to come around there.
Okay.
So who basically see at one stage you say that we give the data to doctor, the diagnosis and the clinical data. Another time you say it is the doctor who is entering the data. Another time you say it is the nurse who is entering the data. So who is the prime, the 1 point?
No, let me clarify that. The data that's being entered when the patient is registered, which is the first registration. I will just show you which one. Yeah, exactly. The name is just general registration.
Yeah, this is
being entered by
something which will remain at the front desk.
Right. This is the front desk is being entered by
If you come down to the report, there are two fields in the report. which are purely
Okay, once the main registration has been done, then there is a registration that is done either at the in trauma. There are three departments. One is the neuro, the surgery, and the ortho. So once the patient has been taken in, and he has been given a particular, he's been assigned a particular doctor. At that time, the doctor is the one who is making the entry into the neuro registration. And if the patient is then being moved from one place to another, at that time there are nurses or SRs who are making the entry to each.
So that is the question basically, who is the one point owner of separator?
Well, I would say in case of neuro, it would be in charge of the neuro section.
No, but if the nurse is also entering the data,
Right.
doctor is also entering the data,
Right.
call center is also entering the data.
No, call center is not entering, call center is only accessing it. We have no power to enter any data.
So it remains between the paramedics and the
Right. And the doctors.
and the
Yes, sir. So but you do have valid questions. Somebody has to validate what has been entered.
And the data which has been entered by the doctor,
Yes.
can it be modified by the nurse or paramedic?
It can be modified, yes.
So,
But one level higher. It has to go into admin for modification.
okay. If it cannot be protected by some password by to doctor only.
No, that's where admin comes in. That means the person who has to modify it has to be one level higher.
Administration.
One level higher. Whether you call it admin or something else is immaterial, but it's one level higher.
You spoke about this nurse quality improvement program.
Right.
How is the data for that getting captured from where? Is it captured in the data?
The SR of the JR, the senior resident, junior resident, and the doctors are the one who are entering data. And they are getting feedbacks from either the patients or their observation. They are getting feedback from either the patients or their own observations.
Usage time for each equipment separately.
Yes.
So, for example, in a OT,
Yeah.
there are several equipments which is needed to perform a surgery.
Right.
So, are all those things are a key valid component to enter to get a kind of data that you are requiring.
Right. Each one is captured separately. Each one is captured separately. I'll just particular display. What it is given, let's say, we take corpus for example. All the equipment that has been used on hand, on what dates it has been used on it. So each equipment is actually being entered separately. And then you can take out information of a particular, you can search out a particular patient and what equipments have been used on it.
But is this data coming from the machine or is it a data which is entered by someone?
It's being entered. It's not directly connected. I know what you're saying. It's not. Yeah. It's not like a DICOM connected, which is giving it immediately the range. Which actually is possible through Vista, but that model is not there. And the other reason for that is not all the equipments right now are DICOM compatible. So you will actually not be able to get all this information automatically. Yes.
Hi, I was very impressed with when you talked about the appointment scheduling part of it because hi, I'm Rahul, I work from Vedanta Medicity. We've been trying a lot hard with the call center thing, central appointment scheduling. But to be very, very honest, I'm lost. I thought we will never do it in India.
Okay.
There are a lot of walk-ins you cannot say no. All patients are VVIPs or maybe more than that. And your VIP doctors only will say, take this guy, throw this guy out, do this, do that, and all.
Right.
And appointment scheduling, if you have implemented the way you said, to be very honest,
Right.
I mean, that is hands-on. Because, hands-off, sorry, because How can you cancel, see, it has to be totally true. So if I say 8:15 I give Rahul an appointment and it is up to 8:30, you have to make slots, and then if I come at 8, maybe 8:31, it would not take mine. So for every single appointment for the delay, I have to cancel it and reschedule it to get a proper report out of it. Same goes with equipment utilization. If I say I have 2 X-ray rooms and I say until unless someone is doing operationally correct time, start, complete, everything and all the scheduled procedures only. So until unless I do all of it every single day, it is impossible. And I really felt it is not too easy. So if you could just guide, what have you done, or have you said that there are not no manual things and nothing? It is 100% total strict appointment based. But then what about emergency? I mean, trauma will still get some of it.
I'll tell you.
So how do you manage?
Very valid question. We had nightmares when we were implementing. For one basic reason is that in a government hospital especially,
to see a particular doctor. So do you give appointments for that doctor? For example, he is sitting on all weekdays.
Right.
So do you give appointments like from Monday to Saturday, or you make a schedule that only 100 appointments for that day and you close it and you will give the next day? Because if you give 500 in a day, it will run into months. That the so-and-so patient who has called today, he will be given an appointment after 1 month.
actually what happened was before we implemented the system, there was no system in which the number of patients were being restricted to see a doctor. Since everybody was a walk-in, literally there were no appointment system. Everybody was a walk-in. There would be like literally 100 of patients standing in queue or lying on the floor all over the trauma center. And so once we implemented the system, at that time it was told to us that there will be no restrictions on number of appointments for a doctor. They told us that even if we give a 2-hour slot,